How's it, folks? Before we get started, let me begin with clarifying what I meant by beginner's perspective. I have played many hours of Skyrim on my PC and have only recently gotten into VR, so this is a perspective of someone with many fond memories of Skyrim, but not much experience in VR just yet. There will be chapters if you wish to go to a specific section or skip a part you're not interested in. I also want to point out that this is not a review of Skyrim VR the game, but more about what experiencing Skyrim in VR is like. One final disclaimer before we get started is the significant difference between watching VR footage on your screen and the depth perception you get from seeing it all in VR. This is probably what adds to the immersion the most. You really have to try VR to understand, as a flat display really can't replicate it. With that said, let me start off with a bit of background. The original Skyrim and Special Edition is still one of my favorite games and possibly my favorite role-playing game, especially with the amount of hours I spent in Tamriel during my teenage years. Playing a couple of rounds of Skyrim GeoGuessr brought the nostalgia back, and after I recently bought a VR headset, I almost immediately wanted to re-experience some of the memories of Skyrim in VR, and this certainly delivers on that. After a couple of hours of modding, that is. I was fortunate that even though I generally get fairly bad motion sickness while traveling in cars and planes, I didn't experience that in VR at all. So being able to stroll around Skyrim and its environment has been a treat. However, after playing about 2 hours of vanilla Skyrim, I remembered why I haven't touched vanilla since 2012. And there are a couple of issues associated with vanilla VR that I wanted to add mods immediately to either remove them or mitigate them. One of the major issues for me was the lack of interactability for the VR port, which I was kind of hoping would be the whole point for the VR game, where you could shake your wrist quickly through an enemy's body to almost kill them, or how your hands pass through or phase through everything, or even just disappear when you're holding a weapon. VRRK and HRGGS, or Frick and Higgs, go a long way to change that by adding a full body and making interacting with the environment not only possible, but some of the most fun I have had in the game. But I'll cover more on that later. Most of my mods come from the Foos compilation on Wabberjack, with a few more personalized ones I was interested in, such as one that let you imbue your weapon with a spell in your offhand that gave various effects depending on the spell. But I mainly used it to navigate the dark dungeons and caves as a glorified torch with the lighted cables. With that out of the way, let's move on to different playstyles. Just like Flatroom, Skyrim VR has multiple different ways of playing, from what everyone gravitates towards being a sneaky archer, to a skilled warrior cutting through their enemies, to what my current character's playstyle is that of a powerful mage, and the many variations between them. I'll start off by saying that I didn't totally enjoy wielding the weapons in vanilla Skyrim, and I'm not entirely satisfied with my current mods, as using it is still a bit too floaty, and I sort of kinda disliked how the weapons pass through the enemies. Maybe I still need to change the settings or get new mods to make it feel a little bit weightier, but as it stands, it is not my favorite, which leads on to the next main playstyle. I have made so many playthroughs with an archer build that I was adamant to not do so in my first playthrough in VR. Yet using a bow and hitting distant targets without any aiming reticule is incredibly satisfying, and something I have to actively stop myself from going back to. I should mention that was from a simple archery overhaul mod, as vanilla archery had the same issue of spamming attacks and not something I enjoyed, which I guess is one of the major upsides of Bethesda games, as not only the amount but also the incredible quality that allow anyone to customize their own game to their preferences. Another thing I particularly enjoyed of the mod was the need to reach over your shoulder to remove another arrow from the quiver before lining up the next shot. It completely added to the immersion and made me feel like I was inside the world. As mentioned earlier, I made my character with the goal of being a powerful mage, and I installed a separate mod that edited my stats so that I gained increased experience from magic but decreased experience from using any weapons and armor, to basically push myself even further into the magical playstyle. I would also usually be a solo adventurer, but as this is also the first time I'm going 100% into the mage playstyle and realizing how fragile I actually am, running around with a couple of companions to act as beat shields and bait for my pyromaniac of a character is a must. The companions also make the journey a little bit more interesting compared to if I was going solo, especially when they provide some insightful comments just as I start doing some weird stuff, like when I discovered I could pick up the Giant's Club and my monkey brain took over almost immediately.
You are such a show-off. Yeah, okay, I know that look you're giving me, but it's important to let people know that you are superior.
An interesting discovery I made while casting spells is because of the tracking for both controllers. Matching hands, I could dual wield spells and fire them towards two different enemies simultaneously. This led to me trying to do so at almost every conceivable opportunity. However, with how frantic combat seems in VR, I didn't pull it off as often as I wished to. Once I had unlocked the perk Impact and the Firebolt spell, it became my mainstay for the simple reason that it turned me into a mobile cannon that staggered and set ablaze any foolish enough to charge at me. It is also oh so satisfying to let loose in VR, and maybe a little bit therapeutic to go looking for a dragon and send enough fireballs at it that it crashes and burns. And then I'll stroll up to it, pry open its mouth, and suck up its soul. Which leads me on to my next section. One of the things I enjoyed from the original Skyrim was the dichotomy between blood-pumping, almost frantic action and the slow, quiet moments that just enjoying the views and the atmosphere. In VR, it seems like they took that concept and dialed it up to make both points bigger and the contrast between them all the more pronounced. One example I have of this is White River Watch, the abandoned camp in the mountainside overlooking Whiterun with the blind old man on watch at the entrance. After fighting through the bandits and beating the boss at the end, I stopped to look out and take in the view. And now I would periodically return there just to sit in that chair and cast my gaze over Whiterun and the plains, with the sound of the wind blowing and the fantastic soundtrack just adding to the experience. After that, I would go out of my way almost like a tourist to look for new spots to enjoy and come back to, which makes me want to do a playthrough as a pacifist, hiring others to protect me while I go around like some rich fool, getting caught up in dangerous situations and running for safety while others deal with the problem, and then give them a pat on the shoulder or on top of their heads and continue on to their next point in my Skyrim journey. One other thing to take note of in VR is the scale of everything constantly catching me off guard. Right at the beginning, with the giant spiders leaping at me, actually made me flinch and take a moment to calm down. Or when we first encounter the dragon and it's flying like usual, but when I come up to it, I have to crane my neck to look up at it. It makes it that much more intimidating and makes me feel rather small. Which started the Great Dragon Hunt of 2023, where I go out of my way to look for them and blast them with my fireballs. I promise that I don't have any pyromaniac tendencies, but sometimes you just have to let off some steam.
Know what I love to do when I have a little too much spare gold? Find a beggar and pay them to harass people. They are so desperate for money that they will do almost anything. It can be very entertaining to watch.
Which brings me on to what is probably my favorite in Skyrim VR. Messing with the NPCs. I know I'm not the first to do so, but I have purposely tried to not watch over other people's videos in order to not color my own perception of Skyrim VR. So when I learned I could not only grab NPCs but also give them a good clap across the face, I immediately stopped what I was doing and went looking for one of the most annoying NPCs in the game, Nazim. And once I found him, we proceeded to have a civilized chat, which led to him looking like he wanted to be anywhere else but near me, while I tried to see how many times I could slap him before the guards tried to stop me. Turns out I could keep going and no one seemed to care about our little boy Nazim. And when Ancano tried to go all dramatic on me with him standing in front of the window while in shadow and trying to be all menacing, I simply walked up to him and started slapping him as well. I went on to follow him and, let's say, manipulated his body to look like it was made from rubber, while Mirabelle told him to stop making others feel uncomfortable with his presence, while I was busy poking and prodding him with an orcish dagger.
I've had yet another complaint. Please stop barging in on experiments in progress.
My dear, I am merely observing proceedings.
Well then observe from a greater distance. You're making people uncomfortable.
Which leads me on to what I think is one of the greatest strengths of VR in general, and Skyrim VR in particular, which is the ability to create your own fun using the environment or general situation. Let me share a couple of examples. On the way to Mount Athol from the statue of Azura, which on its own is worth visiting just to stare up at it and maybe even start worshipping it, there lies a fairly common tragedy of a dead couple and a horse next to a broken carriage. I did the usual Skyrim thing of looting all their valuables when I noticed the spade. Deciding to pick it up, I started to see what I could do with that, from balancing small objects to flinging stuff around. Until I walked up to one of the bodies and realized the fairly robust physics engine would probably allow me to start flinging the bodies around, and so that is what I did for the next 10 minutes. In fact, I enjoyed doing that so much that for the first time, I chose to not only deliberately put the spade in inventory, but to also keep it in there until the next time some enemy annoyed me enough that I would take my special spade out and toss their corpse all over the place until I was satisfied. I even did that to a bandit that had the gall to keep dodging my fireballs, so when I finally set him on fire, I picked up my trusty spade and began to burger flip his body in a lap around the fort. Just past that renowned location where I picked up the legendary spade, which will now be known all across Tamriel, one of the boulder traps just triggered, leading to them rolling down the hill towards me. Seeing the steel battle axe embedded in the ground, I remembered that my brother recently got into golf. The boulders are vaguely ball-shaped, and the axe is sort of similar to a golf bat if you squint hard enough, so also tried my hand at a bit of golf in Skyrim VR. I was honestly surprised by how far the boulders got launched off of the mountainside. I'm sure you all remember the unskippable monologues from quest NPCs that you had to just stay there and listen to in order to advance the quest. Well, in VR, I found you could be an absolute menace and completely disruptive, but as long as you let them drone on, you could keep messing with them. I first found out with the Sijic monk in Sarthal, as I kept poking him with the torch while he was trying to tell me about serious and possible end of the world. But I probably had the most fun in the Blue Palace with the Bard's College quest. This is supposed to be some serious court appeal to reinstate the burning of King Olaf Festival, but my one-track mind wanted to focus on something other than hearing Vialma recite the poem again. So I noticed there was a staff behind Jarl Elisif, and had a bit of fun doing my absolute best to be the absolute worst without breaking any laws that could see the gods descend on me. Of course, after encountering Erica, I added him to my slap-on sight list along with Nazim and Ankano. My original plan was to roleplay as a wise mage that helped deal with the drag crisis. But it wasn't long after discovering all I could now do in VR that I gravitated towards being a complete menace that the others only keep around to deal with the dragons before they try and get rid of me. Unfortunately for them, the vampire crisis will then start, and so they were forced to wait for me to finish them off. But when they banish me to Solstheim, a brand new crisis arises. Eventually it will get to the point where they are forced to tolerate me, but clearly dread me coming anywhere near them. Overall, I have thoroughly enjoyed my time in Skyrim VR and look forward to spend my time in it. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you wish to see me do something similar to a favorite VR game of yours, let me know in the comments down below. Any feedback would be greatly appreciated, as I'm still new to this and still trying to figure stuff out as I go along. If you would like to see more such videos, hit that subscribe button as it will help me to know what sort of content you guys like to see. I hope you all have a great day, and cheers for now.